I can just say, if I do speak too fast, please just heckle me. I do have a habit of speaking too quickly, I'm afraid, especially when I've got a lot of material to get through, which I have been told to hurry it up as well. So the other point is the slides. Really, the slides I'm going to show are a flavour of the research I've been doing, etc. And anyone is welcome to come up afterwards and question me or ask to see the slides or etc. etc. Please do so. So they might put a few questions in your mind, and feel free afterwards, after the speakers, this event's over, to come up and question me. I'm not actually against fracking. I'm probably the only person in the room that's not opposed to fracking. However, I'm an independent engineer, and I've done a study into the regulation and inspection and monitoring of fracking in the UK over the last 3 years. I'm an ex-seismic engineer, I'm an ex-wireline engineer, and I have 16 years on oil and gas rigs in process automation. So I have a fair amount of knowledge on the subject. So if we move down, that's basically me. I won't dwell on it too much. What I will say is I've been advising and assisting the UK government. I also assisted the Royal Society. That's what the RS summary stands for there. And indeed, they actually published a number of my recommendations in their final report last June to the UK government. The key one being we need industry-specific shale gas or unconventional fossil fuel regulations. The UK government have accidentally ignored that recommendation. The other key point there really of that list is that I'm a local resident in probably the main area in the UK for shale gas. It's estimated 85% of all shale gas will come out of the Fylde coast in Lancashire. So it's also the only area in the UK to have been fracked, and it's the only area in the UK that's going to be fracked probably in the next 5 years or so. So it's a rather important area, and it's actually how I came to be involved in this project, because I live there, and of course I know a fair bit about the subject. Okay, so moving on straight away. Is hydraulic fracturing new or old? This is a big debate going on in the UK and probably across Europe as well. Basically, in a nutshell, I'm not sure if you can read, quite hard to read with the lights on. I did ask for the lights to be turned off, but apparently it's not possible. Basically, high-volume hydraulic fracturing using slick water and other additives into lateral sections in unconventional reservoirs at high pressures is new. Fracking has not been around for decades and decades. This is good propaganda and spin. Basically, it was developed over the last decade, around about 2002, primarily in the States. I call it original hydraulic fracturing, that they keep going on about in the UK and saying, oh, there's been thousands of wells drilled and 200 were fracked. This is where you drill generally vertical wells, not lateral, not horizontal, usually into conventional reservoirs. And this is where gas flows more easily. The permeability is higher, and it's at lower pressures. And yes, it is true that type of original fracking was done in the States. I think the first well to be fracked was 1947. So it is true that there is some original fracking, but it's like comparing a small grocer's shop and a hypermarket. In the UK we have a big one called Tesco. It's like comparing Walmart, for example, you know, and a small grocer's shop. They are so unrelated. It's just nonsense to say that high volume hydraulic fracturing is the same as original fracking. Unconventional reservoirs do not generally, I'm reading my things because I realise you probably can't actually see them. Unconventional reservoirs do not generally allow gas to flow easily, ultra low permeability, and so they require high volume hydraulic fracturing, as in 20 million litres of chemicals, sand and water per well, to be injected in various stages at pressures in the order of around about 6,000 psi. And in the Bowland Shale, my area in the UK, in the northwest of the UK, this leaves round about 50% of the fracking fluid in the target formation post-frack. This is new. It is not old. Okay, on to the regulations. Are they robust? Well, they're robust, aren't they? The UK government in particular, which I've been studying, constantly states that the regulations are robust, that the UK has the best standards in the world. The Prime Minister and his various ministers precede each new statement in the UK with basically this line: it's safe, it's regulated, it's strictly monitored, and England or the UK is the best at it. Surprise, surprise. Regs develop The regs in the UK were developed post-Piper Alpha. Actually, that was 25 years ago last month. I was in the oil and gas industry directly then as a wireline engineer. 167 people died on Piper Alpha, and after that point, the government appointed a guy called Lord Cullen, and he came out with a report, and basically he moved regulations to being an entirely self-regulatory or goal-setting approach. So it was prescriptive until then. Those regs are primarily aimed or directed at workers and plant, because there are no public offshore and there is no environment to protect, or no countryside to protect. Now, I know some people here maybe would take objection to that, but that's the reality of working in the North Sea. It all goes off the rig. That's just the way it is, I'm afraid. So that's how the regs were developed, entirely self-regulatory, post-Piper Alpha. The other thing Lord Cullen recommended 25 years ago is that at that time the Department of Energy in the UK was the cheerleader for the industry, as in dishing out the licenses and making money from it, and it was also the regulator. So consequently, Lord Cullen recommended that was hived off to the Offshore Safety Division, or they created the Offshore Safety Division in the UK. It was a sort of part of the Health and Safety Executive. The government very kindly scrapped the Offshore Safety Division on the 1st of April this year. They call it streamlining or restructuring in state speak. So government now determined to remove regulation in the UK, as I say, streamlining, to maximise interest of the operators in the UK onshore. The Office of Unconventional Gas and Oil, that's what OUGO stands for, I proposed that actually to the Minister of State at the time, John Hayes. We've got a musical chair of Minister of State in the UK for energy, so he's already gone. They told me no, absolutely no chance, no new offices on shale gas. Then they called me back down to Parliament and told me, Mike, you've changed government policy, we're going to do it, which I was delighted. However, they haven't quite done what I proposed. So the Office of Unconventional Gas and Oil is now offering tax breaks of 50% to the frackers, and it's overseeing the wholesale scaling back of the regulatory framework. So as I mentioned before, on the 1st of April this year, the Offshore Safety Division, the only regulator in the UK that really knew the oil and gas industry, they were scrapped, restructured, sorry. And the Environment Agency, the other main regulator in the UK, they've been told that they're to reduce the time for permits under the Mining Waste Directive to 2 weeks from their present 3 to 6 months by February next year. Also, reversing what Cullen said or recommended, the same Office of Unconventional Gas and Oil, the same office is now in charge of both monitoring regulation and cheerleading for the shale gas industry. So there's just a small bit of a conflict. To give you a couple of examples of how regulations are working in the UK, the Health and Safety Executive, when it was still running it, the Offshore Safety Division, made 0 visits to the high-volume hydraulic fracturing wells drilled by Quadrilla Resources to ensure that they were constructed to what had been agreed. And the Offshore Safety Division is responsible for well integrity, for ensuring those wells don't leak. The number of visits they made was 0. When I asked how do they regulate then, they said, we get a fax from Quadrilla on a Friday afternoon, tells us it's all fine, we file it away. That's the regulations we've got on well integrity, or the inspection, should I say. The EA themselves, the Environment Agency, they're a little bit confused. I asked them, how many visits have you made, how many samples have you done, etc., etc. Do you actually check for the fracking chemicals going down the well? And they were a little confused as to whether their visits were random or not. I got different answers from different offices. Also, they did tell me under an FOI, Freedom of Information Act, that they do not verify the fracking chemicals going down, what they are and in what concentrations. They ask Quadrilla. They also do not verify the quantity of flowback that flows back up the well, and this is crucial because, as we've seen coming out of the States, this flowback water, but I wouldn't really call it water, you couldn't drink it, well, you could if you wanted to die. This water basically, or fracking fluid, basically contains a number of nasty chemicals and metals and is very expensive to dispose of. So it's important that it's properly monitored and verified. The EA ask Quadrilla, the operator, so that's just perfect. EU regulations, are they robust or aren't they? The Environmental Impact Directive, in brackets precautionary principle, this states that basically, I think it applies to, I've been told it applies to 1 hectare and above. The industry easily avoids this by making its pads 0.9 of hectare. Then there's no need for an environmental impact assessment at all. There's 4 pads close to my home in Lytham St Anne's in the northwest of England. None have had an environmental impact assessment. They don't need to. From political standpoint, a few of the operators now are thinking we better do these EIAs, propaganda and all that. So where there's a politically required EIA, they then bring in what's called a schedule tool scoping doc, and this significantly reduces the impact of the impact assessment. So they can use a scoping doc to say remove traffic, remove noise, remove pollution, etc., from the EIA, making it rather pointless. The water frame, so like I say, it's easily get roundable. The precautionary principle basically means you take precautions to ensure you don't need an EIA. That's how that applies to the operators. The Water Framework Directive, okay, there's exemptions for oil and gas, Article 11, as you can read on the screen, 3(j), water injection. The EU view, I understand, is that that exception does not apply. However, the member states don't agree with the EU. As far as they're concerned, it does apply. And so therefore we need clarification, a lot more clarification from the European Union in that respect. So I'll just get a quick drink there. And then we have the key one, the Mining Waste Directive, open to interpretation. I think that's putting it mildly. I pushed for all waste to be included, not just the flowback, and I did that through a paper in the UK, a national paper in the UK. Finally, the EA relented. Lord Smith relented. He went and got legal advice himself first. It's all about the legalities, isn't it? Came back and said, OK, then yes, all the waste, including all the waste in the target formation. So in my case, around about 3 million gallons or 12 million litres per well that remains down in each well, is all now part of the EA's permit under the Mining Waste Directive. However, in the June conference here in Brussels that we held here, I was speaking to a number of lawyers from London, and they were saying clarification is needed. They don't accept the EA's ruling in this, and they're being instructed by the industry to reopen the Mining Waste Directive, to exploit it to the full. In the UK, 3.7 million litres from Priesthall 1, the only well to have been fracked, the one, by the way, that caused the earthquakes, went into the Manchester Ship Canal after being treated, in inverted commas. By the way, there's no treatment for naturally occurring radioactive material, at least not yet. They're working on it, but there isn't yet, other than diluting. New methods are being sought. EA consider it standard industrial effluent. That's what they told me. It's not. Not when it can leak 5 miles below the surface. And I tried to point out to them that basically, in the oil and gas sector where I work and pharmaceuticals, when you are looking at a chemical plant or a pharmaceutical plant and you're looking at its waste, etc., and how it deals with that, you can see the filtrate receiver vessels, you can see the piping, you can see the drains, you can inspect it. When it comes to an oil and gas well, you can't. It could be leaking miles below the ground. You need what's called wireline tools to inspect that, to see exactly what's happening. However, the Environment Agency don't know what wireline is. They don't have the tools to do it. They can't enforce it. A few more on the Mining Waste Directive. The EA is now reducing the time, as I said earlier, from the average 3 to 6 months to allow full consultations and objections and due process to 2 weeks under pressure from the UK government, which is hell-bent on fracking the UK. And the Office of Unconventional Gas and Oil, they're really putting pressure on the regulators to streamline and get the frackers moving fast. Article 1 of the MWD, the competent authority may reduce or waiver the requirements for the deposit of non-hazardous waste. Well, my competent authority, the EA, consider the flowback non-hazardous. This is with lead at 1,438 times drinking water, cadmium at 36 times, chromium 72, arsenic 20, and naturally occurring radioactive material at 90 times the maximum permissible limit. This is non-hazardous, according to the Environment Agency in the UK. I would like to see them drink it. So basically, this is the water, the flowback, that can leak into the aquifer, and then animals, etc., agriculture, and anyone using a well is then drinking or using that water. But apparently it's non-hazardous according to the EA. The Mining Waste Directive needs specific provision for exploration and exploitation of unconventional fossil fuels. It needs specific clarification of the points to ensure compliance is clear for all member states. Compliance with the Mining Waste Directive needs monitoring and enforcing across the EU. At this time, it is very, very easy to get round the Mining Waste Directive. I could do it in an afternoon. Regulations and directives come to nothing if they're not monitored. It's all very well stacking up all these regulations here in Brussels, but if they're not complied with and they're not policed and they're not punished, oh, no chance, they're not punished and not reported, then basically what's the point of having them? So is the UK system robust? Is the EU system robust? I think you can make your own mind up. Why do we need regs at all? If well integrity is not built in cementing casing, then the well will leak. This leakage can be vertical and horizontal. Vertical leakage is where fracking fluid and methane move up the outside of the casing in the annulus in between and up to the weakest formation, usually the aquifer. This represents the bulk of the risk post-frack. The horizontal leakage is out of the target formation and through faults and pores over time. This rents the bulk of the risk over time, maybe 3 decades. Leaks from flanges, valves, etc. on the surface, that's another source, but that's just poor maintenance. You can repair a well if the leak's discovered, but only if you're monitoring and monitoring independently. So annular pressure readings, cement bond logs, acoustic gas detectors, etc. Wells need monitoring over their entire lifetime. You can't just monitor over their commercial lifetime, which has been pointed out, can be very, very short indeed. So what if a gas well leaks? Does it matter? Who really cares? Methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas than CO2, about 20 times more. So all the green advantages of burning gas are then eliminated, or burning gas over coal are then eliminated. In fact, worse, shale gas could end up being dirtier. Fracking fluids contain substances that, if contaminating the aquifer, will spread over a large area, hundreds of kilometres squared, and pose a significant threat to agriculture, wells and livestock, i.e. the food chain. Then public health. Then we get EU bans like we did over mad cow disease. Then we get losses, and then we get compensation. It could end up being a net loss for the UK and for Europe. One well alone will leave 10 million litres of fracking fluid in the ground. Just one exploratory well leaking has the potential to cause widespread damage to the environment and pose a risk to public health. You cannot any longer distinguish between the exploratory and the production phases. You need these regs now. Just the one and only well. Sorry. Oh, sorry, I've been told I've got 2 minutes, so I do apologise, but it's just panel one went on so long, I'm sorry. The one and only well fracked in the UK so far, Priesel 1, 200 metres from Wheaton Village and 5 kilometres from Blackpool, population 250,000, caused 2 tremors. Now, I'm not really worried about what damage that did to people's property or houses, to be honest. I'm very worried about what it did to the well. It damaged the well over a very large interval and with severe deformation for over 240 feet. Just those 2 tremors. Here's a typical well. I won't go over it. This is the one that caused the earthquakes. I won't dwell on it because I've got to hurry along, I'm afraid. There is the very well that caused the earthquakes, the first one in the world to ever be linked to earthquakes, by the way. The UK did that research. In fact, Quadrilla commissioned that research, in fairness to them. There's a single vertical well on a pad at Priesel 1, and there's what we're getting. We're going to be getting super pads, and we're going to be getting the most intensive drilling in the world in the UK. They've never done pads with 40 lateral sections before. They're going to start in Lancashire. So that's what we're facing. That's what it looks like in the States, an area about 75 miles by 50 miles. That's 3,000 wells there. And this is what it looks like in the northwest of England. Each pad represents between 10 and 40 wells. We're getting around about 3,000 in that area. There's about 4 million people living in that area as well, by the way. The production area itself is about 30 kilometres by 30 kilometres because the UK government halves the size of the licence area after 5 years. There's a typical shot of flaring. I won't dwell on that. You all know what flaring looks like. Regulation in the UK, just a few of them that I've brought to the government's attention. Baseline methane monitoring, production and legacy. Flowback quantity verification. Flowback recycling. It's illegal under the Mining Waste Directive. Thanks, EU. Storage and disposal. Seismic traffic light bond for abandonment. I was told by a director of Quadrilla that basically what happens in the States is that companies shift off non-commercial wells to businesses that are about to go bankrupt, oh, you don't say. And so consequently, they can't look after that well for the following 30 years. I'll keep moving on. Sorry, radiation is another one. I don't want to be alarmist here. Wireline logging uses large sources of radiation, 8 to 23 curies on the fast neutron side. These will cause death pretty fast. In actual fact, if you had one of these sources beside you for about an hour, if you didn't realise, if you picked it up in the street, you would have a 50% chance of surviving 1 month. there's going to be about 9,000 logs in Lancashire done with these sources. So when this starts moving onshore in the intensive way it's going to, I think...
Mike, I'm really sorry. She needs to leave, and it's really good if you have a chance to react to what she says. So
Okay.
if you could stop now, and then if there's something you feel is really missing, you could say that after she made her intervention.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep, sure.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks very much, and sorry for rushing things. It's a pity that this is an extremely interesting discussion today, and it's a pity that we are running late, and I'm really under time pressure here. So very quickly, my name is Carina Vopel. I'm from the European Commission DG Environment. I'm leading a small team who is currently, who has been assessing the environmental impacts and risk of shale gas in the past months, and looking at the prevention management measures that should be put into place. I think it's very important that the European Parliament is providing these opportunities for debate and information. And I'm very impressed by the work and commitment of the civil society, the representatives here today. Your contributions are essential to this file. I will keep it rather short on the basics. There's a very interesting brochure that I had a quick look at that has been distributed here today, probably also will be made available online. It has some basic information on the EU legislation. What I would like to say briefly is that we have indeed looked at the existing EU legislation. We've been also sampling a bit the situation at national levels. The relevant regulatory provisions are split between very, very many different instruments, and it makes this whole exercise extremely complex. What I can say is that there are gaps, there are ambiguities, and in our view, there is to date not a guarantee at EU level that the impacts and risks are being optimally addressed. Now, as we have heard, there are divergent interpretations at national levels on which of the EU rules apply and when. And this, of course, leads to a lot of legal uncertainty, unpredictability. Public authorities do not necessarily know how to tackle these situations. So just a couple of illustrations. In relation to the Water Framework Directive, for instance, there are diverging interpretations as to whether the fluids which are remaining underground are mining waste or not. I mean, this is legalistic, very legalistic talk, but at the end, these are the small details that make all the difference. As Mike was saying, there are national differences as to whether an environmental impact assessment is required or not. Under the Environmental Liability Directive, activities such as the management of mining waste are covered. The Mining Waste Directive requires a full financial guarantee if the well is considered as a waste facility. So we see that we have many of these nitty-gritty questions of definition involved in this. There are also a number of impacts and risks which are not at all addressed by the legal framework today. For instance, the public disclosure of chemicals. This is not foreseen in REACH. Underground risk characterization, again, applies to waste facilities. Question of definition here. We do not have requirements for baseline reporting on water, air, seismicity. No specific requirements on monitoring. And as was mentioned earlier, with regard to climate change, there are no particular restrictions on venting or flaring. Also, no obligation under the current EU legislation to conduct a strategic environmental assessment, which is very, very important if we want to get an understanding of the cumulative effects. Now, we are working at the Commission with colleagues to provide a framework still before the end of this year, if everything goes fine, to address these impacts and risks and to ensure that the EU legislation provides the maximum clarity and predictability. We have a variety of possible policy options on the table. I think, as has already been said today, we need guidance. Best practices should be disseminated, but also we need to look at the legislation. So my guesstimate at this point in time of the operations is that the outcome will be a combination of these types of elements. To conclude on a more personal tone, I really have the feeling that the public opinion will be a very determining factor in this matter. And while the environmental and climate concerns might not be at the top of the agenda of many EU governments for the moment, I think governments do still tend to listen to people. And that is why the activities at national, local levels in this are going to be crucial and will absolutely make a difference. I'd like to finish with these words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mike, also, you had very many informative slides in your slideshow. I hope you are able to make them available so we can study them in calm later. But I want to remind the Commission of that the Parliament made a resolution in November 2012, and Mike made very concrete examples of where we see problems in the law today. And all people around here, most of them are probably fighting against a specific well or so. But even if they would be legally approved, we would like them to be legally approved, not approved because of lack of legislation. And we have a big worry here that this is not going to be done in a serious way. If I put something wrong in my recycling bag, I pay €120 fine. They can put 3 million liters of toxic water wrong and have nothing. And that's not okay. I think we are not alone to think that way. So my concrete question to you is, when do you believe the Commission will have impact assessment ready and timeline for legislation? Because all of us know you really need to make some initiatives that are legislative.
The impact assessment work is kind of, we have done the work, so the fact-finding and the outlining of the different policy options. This is now being fine-tuned in the very days and weeks, and then we will be proceeding to the next stage, which will be about drafting a communication. So it will be, in any case, a communication, and then accompanied by, as I said, recommendations, guidance, and then, depending on the outcome of the process, a legal component.
At the same time?
Yes, hopefully, if the timeline allows for us to go through this exercise, and we might be looking at amending of individual pieces of legislation, or one alternative would be a standalone piece of legislation, specifically on shale gas. So nothing has been excluded yet. All of the options are being weighed, and then, of course, we also need to look at the timeliness and the effectiveness of the proposal we will be making, because obviously any legislation will take several years to be applicable and effective. So I think one first step will be, in any case, to make the rules of the game transparent and clear. And that is what we expect to have very shortly, hopefully by the end of the year.
Mike, with your long experience in this sector, do you have any advice that the Commission should think about before they have to leave?
Yeah, well, I do. I mean, I've got it actually here in my conclusion, pretty much, you know, so maybe I should just read my conclusion. It's only 2 slides. It's only on, I promise you. Basically, and this is really for the Commission, regulations need to be developed to cover exploratory field development plan and production stages, not just production. This is coming out of the UK government all the time, that the regulations are fine as they stand at the moment. We'll beef them up when it comes to production. That's not acceptable. Fracking a few hundred metres from my house, from my home 2,500 homes in Livingston Towns, 20 million litres per well. If that well leaks, then a large area will be affected. Just one well can damage a huge amount of area and put the public health at risk. So we need those regs now, not later. That's the first thing I'd say to the European Union. The existing regs, I've clearly demonstrated, are not sufficient. They certainly need clarification. They're easy to get round. I mean, you don't have to be a lawyer to get round them. You know, my kids could get round them. So basically, for the new practice, and it is a new practice of high-volume hydraulic fracturing onshore in close proximity to large urban populations, we need new specific regs. And the inspection and monitoring needs to be brought up to that standard. So that a considerable amount of work needs to be done to move from the self-regulatory model to, you know, to a more prescriptive method of inspection. Not entirely. A balanced approach needs to be done with frequent inspections at random by completely independent monitors, not a well examiner, not an independent competent person. I've been there, I've done that. They need to be commercially, where they report, because most of the independent competent persons actually report to the operators, and they're paid by the operators. So they need to be entirely independent of that, and they need to be technically independent as well. And then my last page, honestly, Karina, last page. We need enforcement to be coupled with the compliance. So we need proportionate fines, licence revocation, and criminal proceedings. This is a serious business. It could seriously damage a lot of people's health, as has been seen in the States, and it could damage the agriculture, the environment, tourism, etc. We need proper fines, proper proceedings to match the new regulations. Shale gas and other conventional fuels are seen by some, including the entire UK government, mind you, there's a few vested interests, as a fantastic opportunity for the member states. But from my research, I know it needs close monitoring to prevent an environmental catastrophe and serious risk to public health. The EU must act now and not wait for production. Exploratory phase is underway already. Regs and monitoring needed in place now for this phase to protect the public and the environment, and to be ready to scale up to the field development plan and production later. The directives need urgent updating and clarification to cope with this industry. At the moment, the industry is on a different track. It isn't even ahead of them, and the EU and the UK government are behind the curve. They're on a different track. They're so far ahead. It's so easy to get round the regs. So this needs sorting out, and it needs to be achieved with the assistance of engineers and scientists to ensure relevance and effectiveness, not purely administrators, I'm sorry to say. And just very final points. In the UK, honestly, truthfully, in the UK, I'm as bad as the frackers. In the
Sorry,
UK,
but you are excused. Yeah, you can leave.
Yeah, sorry, Karina. Very quickly, honestly. In the UK, it's a badge of honour amongst MPs and local councils and things to poo-poo Gasland, and I suppose they'll be poo-pooing Gasland too, and saying, oh, that's nonsense, that's rubbish. And if you say that when you're a county councillor or a councillor or an MP, you're trying to make yourself look like you know what you're talking about because you've poo-pooed Gasland. I watched Gasland with a director of Quadrilla, and he told me 50% of it was spot on. And another 30% wasn't verifiable. And when I said, well, hang on a minute, you know, what the hell? He said it was bad practice. He'd actually worked on those wells. It was bad practice. Honest, Mike, it won't happen here. I said, well, I believe you. But I said, well, I think we need a few regulations. And I've been slagged off a fair bit for trying to steer a middle line. I've been accused of many things. I've been accused by one gentleman of murdering 110 people.
I will soon accuse you of stealing time from your guest speakers.
I've been accused of murdering 110 people in the UK for fuel poverty. I've been accused of damaging national security of the UK by certain officials. I've been accused of working for Quadrilla by the protesters. I've been accused of being an Aboriginal and a NIMBY by Professor Richard Selly of Imperial College, head of petroleum engineering. I've been accused of being a green, tree-hugging, beer-swilling loony by the industry.
That's really terrible, I must say.
But the real reason why I've done this is this. That's the reason why I'm involved in this industry, this project. That's why I'm fighting for regulations. I don't think my twins or anyone's children should suffer the horrendous experience of unregulated fracking. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mike. You might not be in principle against fracking, but you really help people here to even better understand why we are.
Fair enough. Right.
Well, please.